Hey there folks, Rel here. Today we'll be rebooting my favorite loadout for the heavy assault class, the one that I like to call Leviathan. Now this loadout crosses factions very easily, but we'll be playing with the VS variant throughout the entire video. And this is mostly due to the extremely high certification cost required to make the loadout effective. But in my personal opinion, it's certainly a worthwhile investment. Leviathan is a massive and legendary sea serpent whose strength is as powerful as it is feared. And much like the Leviathan, this heavy assault loadout focuses on being an extremely unrelenting force, quickly crushing anything that stands before it. In particular, the Leviathan loadout is a close to mid-range centric class, focusing primarily on dealing with enemy infantry and max units, but being plenty capable against enemy vehicles as well. As far as aesthetics goes, we'll be running the Pine Forest armor camo, composite armor on the TR and VS loadouts. NC females kind of look funny in composite armor, so I do tend to steer clear of it there. You'll see various weapon camos throughout the video, but for the sake of creating a consistent image, we'll go ahead and say that black scales will be our preferred weapon camo for the setup. Each helmet being used comes from the Player Studio, with Arthropoda for the VS, Sentinel for the TR, and the Recon Grenadier for NC. The loadout itself, which will be listed in the video description below, will be using the Orion for the VS, the MSW-R for the TR, and the Anchor for the NC. On our primaries, we're going to be using a night vision scope, a flash suppressor, and a laser sight. In the case of the MSW-R and Anchor, each have access to soft point ammo, as well as an advanced laser sight. Both attachments are highly suggested. For the secondary, we're going to be running the Underboss with a laser sight. We'll be using the default starting launcher, or the Decimator if that tickles your fancy. For the ability slot, we're going to be running at least rank 4 Adrenaline Shield, but this really should be capped out before the build is considered effective. For a suit slot, we want to run at least a rank 2 Grenade Bandolier, and the grenades that we'll be using are going to be concussions. And lastly, the utility slot, we'll be using at least 1 brick of C4, but 2 is definitely preferred. If you want to run this class at maximum effectiveness, you're looking at an extremely high cert investment. The Adrenaline Shield is the real high price item, and I just don't feel like it's worth it until rank 4. So before you get it to that point, I suggest just running with the standard nanite mesh generator, which is much less expensive. That said, let's break down each item individually and explain why we've chosen them. The Orion, the MSW-R, and the Anchor are very similar in that they are extremely effective at close quarters combat. The Orion comes default on the VS Heavy Assault class, but most importantly, it has a 0.75 times movement speed multiplier while aiming down sights. The other two weapons do not have access to this feature. This is very helpful as we'll be primarily aiming down sights to get the most out of the build, and moving a bit faster while aiming down sights means that we can cut corners more quickly and more safely than other weapons. However, the Orion does not have access to an advanced laser sight or soft point ammo, and because of this, the Anchor and the MSW-R are just as competitive as their VS counterpart. The Orion and the MSW-R both deal 143 damage per shot up to 10 meters, or 15 if you're running soft point ammo on the MSW-R, and then it drops off to 125 damage at 65 meters. Now the Anchor hits a bit harder at 167 damage up to 15 meters if you're using soft point, and then it drops off to 143 damage at 75 meters. This means that the Orion and the MSW-R are going to be sitting on a 7 to 8 shot kill range, whereas the Anchor can sit on a 6 to 7 shot kill range. Both the Orion and the MSW-R fire at 750 rounds per minute, while the Anchor fires a bit slower at 600 rounds per minute. But regardless of how you break down the stats, you can say that all of these weapons have a very low time to kill within their effective range. That said, here's a visual example of which ranges I feel are most effective with these weapons. The green is what you should be aiming for, so within 15 to 30 meters. The 10 to 15 meter and the 30 to 40 meter mark are okay, but anything below 10 meters is going to put you well within shotgun range, where your weapon will be outclassed. And anything beyond that 40 meter mark is pretty much a waste of time to shoot at. Reload speeds all hover a little over the 3-second mark, and the MSW-R stands out as having the fastest long reload time of the group. 3 seconds is a reasonable reload time, but it's still likely to get you killed if you don't make your bullets count, as each weapon is host to only 50 rounds per magazine, with no option to extend it. We chose to attach the laser sight to this weapon for a couple of different reasons. The first one is that having the ability to hipfire a bit more effectively is important. And even though the hipfire accuracy isn't amazing and you're almost always better off aiming down sights with an LMG nowadays, laser sights make it much more viable. The second reason is strictly for infiltrators, and since we're running a night vision scope, and since infiltrators have become much more prevalent and sneaky than they used to be, you'll be running into them more often. Aiming down sights with a night vision scope puts you at a disadvantage here, since night vision scopes do not show cloaked infiltrators unless you hit them with a bullet and then they'll shimmer for a little bit and disappear. By using a laser sight, you can easily dispatch of enemy infiltrators without losing track of them if they do decide to run off. The flash suppressor is optional, given that you're fighting in close quarters where a muzzle flash isn't wholly necessary, but I still believe that the benefits outweigh the detriments unless you're a headshot wizard that really needs the best accuracy and the lowest cone of fire bloom that they can find. For a secondary, the Underboss makes an extremely powerful finishing weapon for those targets you happen to run out of ammo against. And unfortunately, running out of ammo, or just not being able to reload quickly enough, is a common occurrence with these weapons. The Adrenaline Shield, coupled with a quick time to kill weapon, is the key to this build. If you've unlocked at least rank 4 Adrenaline Shield, you can keep rolling from target to target while keeping a distinct advantage on incoming enemies. The Adrenaline Shield affords players a very aggressive playstyle by allowing them to basically leech health from their fallen enemies and keep your streak going. At maximum rank, each kill is going to net you 140 shield health, so a little bit under a bullet's worth from a 143 damage weapon, and that is a pretty sizable boon to your survivability. On top of that, multiple concussion grenades, thanks to your grenade bandolier, basically gives you free kills on enemies, as they're going to be forced to move and aim very slowly. Snatching up a handful of these free kills is a great way to restock your shield and instantly give you back your combat edge. They're also very useful for dealing with enemy max units. And that's kind of where your C4 comes in. C4 is pretty clumsy by nature. It takes a while to toss, it takes a while to detonate, and it slows you down during the entire process. Concussions will let you maneuver into close range with little to no risk to yourself. The standard Dumbfire or Decimator variants also aid in a boom capacity by giving you additional firepower versus enemy max units and vehicles. In fact, a single brick of C4 paired with a rocket launcher shot is enough to take out an enemy lightning, opposed to most classes having to waste 2 bricks of C4. So that's our build in a nutshell: close quarter centric, kill quickly, incapacitate, and explode everything. Now let's dig into some pointers to make the loadout effective. The first thing I can say is that you want to try and engage 1 or 2 enemies at a time. The best way to do this is to round your corners slowly while aiming down sights. As soon as you see a white heat signature appear, stop strafing and lay into them. Killing enemies in this way will limit the amount of damage that you're going to be taking, while also leeching back your overshield from their lifeless bodies. The Adrenaline Shield's base regeneration is pretty slow, and you want that shield to stay topped off when you can manage. So if you find yourself with an empty shield, it's not a bad idea to stick with allies for a while and farm out a few kills until you get your shields back up. Staying near allies means that you're less likely to be put in situations where you have to activate your shield, which in turn means that you can regenerate it more quickly. Generally speaking though, this build is meant for risk takers. It's not meant for sustained fire, it's not meant for hiding behind your buddies, it's meant to succeed in a single decisive action, like dropping an enemy sunderer, a max unit, or clearing an entire room of hostiles while also killing yourself in the process. You have 0 healing items and your weapons are not amazing at long range, so be the hero, take some risks, and kill absolutely everything you can. Do make sure though that you preempt your rush with concussion grenades. If you have max rank Bandolier and enough resources to make it possible, you can toss up to 4 concussion grenades at a time. Generally, you don't want to empty them all at the same time because concussion grenades do give you a 5-second window where affected enemies are about as threatening as a fluffy couch cushion. That 5-second window is a good deal of time to charge in, to mop up a couple enemies, while still giving you enough time to back out and even toss in another concussion if the situation permits. Throwing concussions is the easy part, but trying not to concuss yourself or your allies is a much more difficult task. That said, while learning to toss your concussions correctly, you want to keep from using them in confined spaces. Instead, go for the long bomb on enemies that are behind cover, say behind a rock or something. You can peg them once, you can inch up, and then you can peg them again, you can inch up, and each time you're going to be resetting the stun duration and making the concussion effect worse. If you're lucky, you'll find a bunch of extremely unhappy campers ready to be picked apart. Play your primary and save C4 for max units and vehicles. This isn't a necessity, but unless your enemies are already concussed, working your primary weapon will usually net you more kills than C4 will. especially if those enemies decide to run flak armor, in which case you're screwed once that concussion decides to wear off. Likewise, you want to stay within your short reloads when at all possible. The Orion, the MSW-R, and the Anchor punish you a good deal for expending all of your ammunition, so do try to keep at least one round in the chamber, which is going to keep your reload times closer to the 3-second mark opposed to the 4. That said, I'm going to leave you with one final clip of a decently long run, making use of absolutely everything I had available to me, and I do remember this run being a whole lot of fun, and hopefully you all will enjoy the clip as well. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you enjoy the loadout, or if you run something similar, or if you have any tips, or would just like to share a loadout of your own, you can do that in the comments section down below. Thanks very much, folks. We're all signing off.